You ever notice how when tech reviewers review products, it's always the greatest thing ever? There's really never any negatives, any true downsides. And when they do a showdown, it's this product versus this product, but there's no real winner here. It's just for whatever's best for you. There's always a winner. And today there is a winner in what we're going to talk about. It's the best budget bookshelf speaker. And the winner's the Wharfedale Diamond 10.2. I'm going to go ahead and spare you the suspense. There's a lot of reasons I like it. There's some things that I don't love about it, but for this price category, budget bookshelf speakers, I think it's the best bang for your buck. And that's really what I try to do here, is give you the best performance to value ratio, not necessarily the cheapest product and not necessarily the best product, just within a given tier, what's going to give you the most performance for the least amount of money. And for this tier, I think, again, that it's this Wharfedale Diamond 10.2. Now, there are other alternatives, which I think is important, and I'm going to share some of those with you because this is a speaker they don't make anymore. They've moved on to the 220 series, which is a great speaker, but not my favorite speaker for the money. So I want to give you those alternatives because you're going to have to track this thing down used if you're going to want to get your hands on it. And when I say budget, I know for everybody, budget means something different. So I want to be clear that this is speakers under $300 in the bookshelf category for the big bookshelves, the 6.5-inch driver, 5.25-inch driver, something like that. All right, first things first, who is this speaker for? This speaker is for someone doing a home theater or a stereo listening station on a budget. And the great thing about this speaker, if you can get 3 of them, which I would recommend if you're doing a home theater, is that it works really well for a center channel, actually better than my baseline test speaker for comparison, which is the B&W 685 in that center speaker role. What I love about these is they've got really good bass response. Some people will even go without a sub for these. I wouldn't recommend it if you want a full breadth of listening experience. But they've also got that classic UK laid back sound. And some people, it's not for everybody. If you're coming from a Klipsch speaker that's like really hot, high-end tweeter, not the newer RP 160, 150, but the classic Klipsch sound with that horn-loaded tweeter is going to be really bright, really detailed, and these might not be the speaker for you, but there's obviously a ton of Klipsch options out there in the same price range. But for someone who appreciates a warmer sound with a good bass response, this is a great speaker, and it's a good all-arounder. It's something that's going to work for music. It's something that's going to work really well in a home theater application without breaking the bank. Again, I want to stress, don't spend more than $220 tops shipped to your door for a pair of these, and it's even worth it because people are looking for singles. If you want to go ahead and buy 2 pair, do your full front stage and sell off the 4th, which is what a lot of people are having to do these days. I'm a huge proponent of that, by the way, doing front, left, center, and right, all the same speaker, not go in the center channel route unless you need that flat center channel to get underneath the TV. So what did I use for my comparison? My baseline for bookshelf speakers is the B&W 685 S1 or S2. The S2's got a little bit better treble reproduction, but both of them have really tight bass response. It's a really good speaker, but it is going to be just above this speaker in the price. You're going to look at around $385 plus shipping, $400, $415 to get them to your door. The thing that really impressed me about this speaker was just how close it was to the 685 in terms of sound reproduction and quality, and maybe a little bit better in terms of serving as a center channel for a home theater setup. Not quite as good in music and not quite as good in the tightness of bass. It comes a little bit unglued at a really low in reproduction and really high volumes, but overall a killer performance at half the cost in the secondary market. If you're looking at $215, $415, you're almost doubling up there for the 685s. Again, I think the 685 is a great speaker. It's what I use in my home theater, but for the money, if you're talking about something that's half the price but 93% as good, it's really worth consideration. So for me, again, I would use this in the home theater application with 3 of the same speaker, and I think you could not go wrong with a setup like that. So what are the biggest pros on these speakers? I think it's the laid back response, the overall feeling of a good all-around speaker. It does do really well with bass. I actually compared it to a Definitive Technologies SM450, which has not only the 6.5-inch driver like this one, but it also has a pretty large passive radiator for low note reproduction, and I couldn't really distinguish much between the two in terms of bass. So the Wharfedale really does well with that. It's great with voices because it's not harsh, it's not shrill, so that's why I said I felt like it was pretty good as a center channel in a home theater setup. The cons for this speaker are it does come apart a little bit on the super low end reproduction. The mid bass is pretty good. At high volume, it comes apart where the B&W doesn't, and even the Definitive didn't. But another con is it's not a con for everybody, but it's the cabinet shape. So it's got a scallop cabinet shape on both sides, which is fine for a lot of people. But if you listen to your speaker, if you have your setup where they're laid down on the side, like let's say you have yours right underneath your TV and you don't have a lot of clearance, so you want to lay them down on the side with a little shallow or real short profile, these are not the speaker for you. Because yes, you could lay them on their side, I guess, but the shape doesn't lend itself because it's not a flat side, it's curved. It's kind of like the problem people had when the original PS3 came out, because it had that curved top, so you couldn't really put much on it, and it just looked weird in everybody's squared off AV rack. So that's something to consider. But again, I'm really picking at this point for a speaker that you can get for $200 used. Really picking, but these are the things that distinguished it from being as good as some of the most well-known Paradigm B&W speakers that cost 2 and 3 times more. So keep that in mind. Okay, so what are we comparing this to have some alternatives? If that cabinet doesn't hold up for us, we need to be able to lay it on the side, or if we can't find these used and we're really looking to get something pretty quick, there's a few options out there that I'd like you to consider in addition to this speaker. So first and foremost, if you can't go the B&W 685 route, or let's say an NHT Classic 3 is a little bit out of your price range, I would like for you to consider that Definitive SM450. It's an older speaker. They have replaced it with the SM55 and I think the SM60 that are a newer speaker, but not as good of a value, in my opinion, in the secondary market. So you're going to pay about $350 to get a pair of those newer ones shipped to your door, where you can get the SM450 for about $100 a pop if you wait and are patient on the eBay or something like an AVS forum. So that's a really good speaker. It does well on the bottom end. It doesn't hit its spec sheet numbers. So if you're really digging into research on comparing this or some others for your bookshelf setup, don't look at the spec sheet, especially for DefTech. They don't get there, but it's a great speaker. It's another speaker that works well with the optics of having 3 of the same across the front. The CLR series center channel is an option for these, but I still would recommend going SM450 all the way across the front. So that one's kind of in the same price point, and they're fairly available in the secondary market. They're not as common, but you can find them. Another one that I think you should consider is the HTD Level 3. This one's got a ribbon tweeter on it, so it's a little bit of a different sound profile than what you'd expect or what you'd hear from the Wharfedale, but it's a great speaker. It's a great speaker for the money. It's a great company. HTD is a company that I think they have a no questions asked in-home trial, and I'm not suggesting you abuse that, but I think that means they stand behind their product, and it's a good product. So that's a budget-minded option that I think it's like $350, $370 shipped new. And the other thing that's kind of cool about these that tells me that people love them is like the 685 S2 and to some extent the S1, you don't see a lot of them show up in the secondary market used, which means people are hanging on to them. So that's another one that you want to consider. If this is out of your budget, maybe drop down to an Andrew Jones Pioneer, which you can get a good bit cheaper, or some Polks. But we're going to do a video for that at some point in that price tier, so I don't want to get too far off into that. Speaking of Andrew Jones, the last one that I'm going to recommend is an alternative for this speaker is going to be the ELAC B6. This is another Andrew Jones speaker that I think it's the first one he produced since he left Pioneer. It's a really good speaker. I don't think it's quite as good as this one, but it's something that's readily available, new or used. You can get it on Amazon for I think like $279 a pair, and then I've seen them used sub $200 on eBay. So that's one to consider. I think it's a good speaker. If I were comparing it to some of these other options, I don't think it would be quite at the level of those, but not quite as expensive either. So there's that to consider. All right, so the last thing I want to say about these in terms of performance and specs is that it's not the most sensitive speaker in the world. I think it's around 86, 87 dB. It's very similar in that regard to the B&W speakers. So if you're coming from Eclipse or something that's highly sensitive, you might notice that you really got to ratchet up the volume, the gain from your receiver or amp that's driving them to get the same level of sound out of them. So I would recommend, if you want to go with these and you're saving a little money for a receiver, to look for something that's a little bit higher on the power band. I push these with an RZ800, which I think is 135 watts per channel, and it did just fine. But if you have something that's a little bit weaker, you might have a little trouble driving these speakers the way they were intended. So that's pretty much it for this one, y'all. I love this speaker, sub $300, used or new. Grab it if you can get it. I like the 220. It's the newer replacement. I just don't like it as much. I think it's a smaller driver. I've heard it. It's not my favorite. I do think it's a good speaker again, but like I said before, the price to performance ratio is not quite there. So what I'd love to hear from you in the comments is a speaker that you would nominate for the best budget hero in that $200 to $300 category, and any experiences you have with this speaker. If you own it, if you love it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you liked the video, give me a like, and if you loved it, how about a subscribe? Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week. Catch you next time.